Welcome back everyone to Genshin Interact. Kokomi coming around on her 4th run while Wanderer gets his first rerun. Let's go through both of these banners for the second half of 3.8 and see whether or not they were a good pulling option for you.
If you do enjoy the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe and check out the rest of the channel for other videos you may be interested in, such as other videos in the To Pull or Not to Pull series, build guides, or our series going over 4 stars. With Fontaine just around the corner, should these characters sap you dry of Primogems, or are they worth a skip?
Now, onto the video. The first character we're going to be looking at is Kokomi. She's going to be the first character on the banner, and we're going to first look at her team function and where she kind of fits in a team, and then go into her kit. So Rift, what can you tell us about her team function in a team?
So looking at Kokomi, we see her as a really great off-field healer, probably one of the best healers in the game, arguably. But she also kind of has a duality with being a great on-field DPS as well. The only difference is, if you're going to build her, you're going to probably just want to go either the healer route and more of a support route, or go the DPS route. Seeing her great Hydra application in off-field heals, but looking more specifically at her kit, Vixen, what can you tell us about her?
Well, she's going to be ascending into Hydra damage bonus, and considering she's a Catalyst user, this is going to help her out a lot. Now we're going to look into her normal attacks, her skills, and her burst. Her normal attack is nothing really special, but if you're going that DPS Kokomi route that Rift was talking about earlier, make sure this is a higher level so you can do as much damage as possible with her. Next is her skill, called Karage's Oath. This is going to summon a jellyfish called Bake Karage, which is its name in Japanese, which is kind of cool. This jellyfish will heal nearby allies and apply Hydra to nearby opponents. This is the main way that you're going to be healing, as well as her burst does a little bit of that as well. Using this skill as well, just so you know, does apply the wet status to Kokomi, so watch out for any reactions that could happen on top of you because of that. Now looking into her burst, Rift, what can you tell us about it?
Her burst is called Nereid's Ascension, and its initial hit will deal Hydra damage to nearby opponents. This will give Kokomi what is called the Ceremonial Garment, and during this state, her normal attacks, charged attacks, and skill damage is increased based on her max HP. The normal and charged attacks will also heal allies, which is very good, adding to her healing capabilities. Also in her burst, she will have increased resistance to interruption, and she can even walk and run on water, which is sometimes what people kind of look past, but this is kind of cool about Kokomi. It doesn't really give any upper hands in combat necessarily, but it is just kind of cool to play around with. Also, the Ceremonial Garment will go away after you leave the field with Kokomi to another character. Also, do note that if you do go DPS Kokomi, her last passive talent gained through Ascensions decreases her crit rate by 100%. Now looking into some similar character comparisons with Kokomi, Vixen, what do we see?
Well, the only real character that is very similar to Kokomi right now is Barbara. You know, they're both Hydro, they're both Catalyst, and that kind of helps. And then also their skills, as well as their burst, also heal. They're mainly healers. But at the end of the day, Kokomi is just simply a better Barbara, and we'll kind of go into whether or not you should be pulling this one or that one if you have this one or that one. But right now, that's just the only similar character that we can really see. Looking past that side of the banner, we're going to go on the other side of the banner and look at Wanderer, getting his first rerun. His main function in a team, and where he kind of fits in a team, is going to be that on-field Animo DPS. He's going to be using a skill, it comes back very quickly, and he's going to be putting out a lot of damage, so at the end of the day, this is going to make sure that he needs to stay on field as long as possible to put out the most damage to your team, while he uses supports and their off-field capabilities. Rift, what can you tell us about his kit?
So Wanderer ascends into crit rate. Obviously, as a DPS unit, this is going to be good so you can focus a little bit more on crit damage when grinding and farming your artifacts. His normal attacks don't really have any special mentions, but they do need leveling, just like Kokomi if you're going DPS Kokomi. His skill is called Hanega Song of the Wind. Using the skill deals AoE Animo damage to opponents and gives Wanderer the wind-favored state as he uses Animo to lift himself into the air. Now in this wind-favored state, normal and charge attack damage will be increased, and while hovering in this state, Wanderer can use what are called Kuuguryoku points to stay in flight. More points will be used if Wanderer sprints or increases height by jumping while in this state. And when he runs out of Kuuguryoku points, the wind-favored state will end. It basically kind of looks like a separate stamina bar, but different in color. Looking into his burst, this is called Kyogen 5 Ceremonial Plays. Now this is a huge burst of suppressing AoE Animo damage that lifts small opponents in the air and knocks back larger opponents. If Wanderer is in the wind-favored state and uses his burst, then the wind-favored state will be ended automatically. Wanderer has some important passive that we do need to briefly go over. Vixen, what can you show us in those?
Well, we do need to look at some of the passives that he's going to be using so that we make sure that each one actually makes sense. Each of these help him do a lot more damage, which is why we're bringing them up in mythical or nautical. His first passive town is called Jade Claimed Flower. If Wanderer comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro, he will gain certain buffs when he's in that wind-favored state. Hydro increases his Kugo-Ryoku points, which means that he'll stay up in the air longer. If he swirls Pyro, it'll increase his attack percent by 30%, and Cryo increases his crit rate by 20%. Both of these will make sure that he does more damage. And Electro increases his ability to regain energy quicker, which is nice to get that burst back just for some extra damage and maybe end a rotation quicker. Make sure that you know that Wanderer can only have 2 of these 4 different buffs at one time, Constellation 0. So make sure you choose the elements that you're using wisely. His second passive talent is called Gales of Reverie. This has a very long description, but basically, and putting it short, dashing and sprinting while you're mid-flight in the wind-favored state has a 16% chance to send out 4 animal arrows that deal a certain amount of damage. Each time your dash or sprint does not send these arrows out when you're in that state, there will be a 12% chance increase the next time you dash or sprint to send them out. So basically, the more and more you do it, the higher and higher your chances go. You're basically playing a gacha game inside of a gacha game. Now looking into a character that's very similar to Wanderer, Rift, what can you tell us about him?
Well, really the only other similar character I can think of at least is Hazo. And this is obviously just because they are both Catalyst users, both wielding the Animo element. And Hazo is based heavily on his skill, while the burst is really just an extra touch of damage when you have it. And honestly, that's kind of how Wanderer feels, where most of Wanderer's damage is through his skill, making his normal charge attacks more powerful, and his burst is really just kind of there like a cherry on top. By the way, also keep in mind that Hazo, despite being a Catalyst user, does need to be up close and personal, much like Baiju, because they are more like melee Catalyst users, so they still need to be close to the target enemies to be able to hit them. Moving on to the next section in this video, we're going to be looking at the weapon banners, starting first off with Everlasting Moonglow. Vixen, what can you show us about this weapon?
Well, this weapon is going to have a main stat of 49.6% HP at level 90, and we're going to be looking at the abilities at Refinement 1. It'll have a healing bonus increase of 10% to the character that wears it, and normal attack damage is increased by 1% of max HP of that equipping character. For 12 seconds after using the burst, normal attacks that hit opponents restore 0.6 energy. This makes sure that you'll get that burst back quicker, so that you can actually just keep a constant rotation of doing more damage. The best characters for this weapon are going to be Kokomi in that DPS route, and any type of Barbara that you use, whether she's going to be for damage or if she's going to be used for healing. Rift, on the other side of the banner, what can you tell us about Tulaytullah's Remembrance?
Yes, so this weapon has a main stat of 44.1% crit damage at level 90, and this is really good for Wanderer because, again, looking back, we know he ascends into crit rate, so this pairs really nicely for building him. It really balances him out and makes him easier to build, essentially. Looking at the abilities on this weapon, assuming at Refinement 1, the normal attack speed will be increased by 10%, and after using a skill, normal attack damage will be increased by 4.8% every second for 14 seconds. After hitting an opponent with a normal attack during this 14-second duration, normal attack damage will be further increased by 9.6% and can occur every 0.3 seconds. Overall, it's a maximum normal attack damage increased gain of 48%. Leaving the field will remove all of these buffs, and using the skill again will reset the buffs from the beginning. The best characters that you can use this weapon on, of course, are Wanderer as a best-in-slot damage weapon for him, but also you can use this if you are doing a DPS Lisa. And Lisa is going to be great just because, she's gotten better. Well, every Electro character has really gotten better because of Dendro. And so using on-field DPS Lisa for an aggravate team maybe is going to be really good, and this weapon will really ramp up her personal damage. Now moving on to the kind of bigger section in our video, looking into the summary, we're going to talk about some pulling options. And our first question that people need to consider is, do you even need either of these characters on your account? And Vixen, how can you help us answer this question?
Well, first, looking at Kokomi, she's going to basically just be that premium 5-star Barbara like we were talking about earlier. She's a good Hydro DPS if you really, really want one, and that's great. But big warning, Fontaine is coming soon, and this possibly could be MiHoYo's way of kind of throwing a very good Hydro character that we currently have and try to throw this out for you to bait. And there might be better Hydro characters in the future that could just be better than her. So it is a little bit risky to maybe go after Kokomi right now, unless you've been really, really wanting her, then obviously pull for her. But with a lot of the things in the future coming, especially with the Hydro area, Kokomi may be a bait for you to pull and use up your primos. Overall, she is a great character and a good pull if you're using her for Bloom teams, but Barbara can also fit the role of a healing role, especially in that Hydro Catalyst area, if you really, really need one, and since everyone has her, it's pretty easy to do. Wanderer, on the other hand, has very, very good potential to be a heavy damage dealer. He's going to be very good because he'll be able to use a lot of different 4-stars, which will help a lot of characters in the beginning, just use a lot of the 4-stars that they're having in the beginning and using a lot of different things, and as well, considering he can swirl the 4 different elements that Animal swirls into, and gets a lot of things from that first passive that we talked about, he'll be very nice to have with early players. The next question we're going to look at is what elements is your account in need of? And Rift, how can you answer that?
So first looking at Kokomi, she isn't that great if you just want Hydra on your account, but she is great when you have her for Bloom teams as an on-fielder. Specifically looking at a team like with Nahida, Nilou, Kokomi, and either another Dendro or Hydro character, that's going to be a really goated team. Looking at Wanderer, he's a solid DPS in the Animo category, and he works very well with 4-stars like Vixen was just saying that you can get in the early game, making him very versatile and easy to use for early game players, and he can be very fun too, also using the skill to just get around quicker, so he isn't a bad option. The next question we look at is, do you have the resources to properly invest into the characters that you are pulling?
Well, to answer this, Kokomi uses Inazuma materials, so her materials are locked behind the story if you haven't gotten to Inazuma yet. Wanderer uses Sumeru materials, and we've been over this a bunch of times before, but we like to say it each time. Even though you can get to Sumeru by walking, even if you haven't unlocked Sumeru the area yet, it is best to get through the story to make your farming a lot easier, or at the end of the day, you could just go and raid other people's worlds. We talked about in a previous video that most people will be pretty accepting into your world, and they'll try to help you out as much as possible. So you could just go to other people's worlds and get the materials that way.
The next question we look at is, what kinds of teams are you trying to build? And to answer this question, Kokomi fits very good in a Bloom team, probably best for her, but she can also be just good Hydra application for other teams you might want to try out, maybe like a Vaporize team with Xiangling, maybe an Electrocharge team with Raiden or Ayato. It's very easy to slot her in where you would need her because she is the healer of the team too, so she has a lot of value in that role. Wanderer plays really well with the elements that Animo can swirl, which make him very easy to pair with many different characters. For example, I know Vixen plays his Wanderer with Diona and Bennett. He gets both the Cryo and the Pyro buffs, which is crit rate and attack, and just gets some solid damage increase for his Wanderer. Whereas I typically have been using Yelan and Bennett, where I'm actually getting the Hydro and Pyro. But that is how some different ways you could use your Wanderer. He can really just be used with all kinds of different elemental characters of the core 4 elements, making him very easy and fun to play.
Looking at your account now, we're going to see what roles do you maybe have filled or not have filled, and how these characters are going to help you. With Kokomi, Barbara fits the Hydro healing role on any account since she is given at the beginning of the game. But Kokomi brings it to another level with her skill and burst healing at the same time, while also putting out way more damage. Looking at Wanderer, there are a lot of other characters besides Wanderer that can fit the Animo DPS role, like Zhao, Heizo we talked about earlier, Venti, and even the Animo Traveler if you don't have any of these other ones. With characters like this, Wanderer is a lot easier to use with multiple different characters, but Heizo fits that role very similarly as well, as he is very versatile as well, whereas characters like Zhao, Venti, and even the Animo Traveler need specific characters to make them do extremely well. The next area that we're going to look at is weighing the dangers from the very bottom, new free-to-play players who just got into the game, all the way to the top of the people that use a lot of different characters and have C6s of 5 stars and put a lot of money into the game. So Rift, what can you tell us about a few of the different perspectives in this area?
So first, starting out with free-to-play players. These types of players will need characters that slot in a plethora of teams and make the game easier before the late game content really starts to kick in. Kokomi can help with Bloom teams, and Wanderer is great with many different characters which make him very flexible. But even though Kokomi can help, mostly in Bloom teams and a few others, she isn't recommended for a free-to-play player with not many characters to go after, because Kokomi, unless you're going into all-out Bloom and you just really like Kokomi, we do have Barbara, and that's the thing. As a free-to-play player, if you already have Barbara, and you should because she's free, Kokomi's value starts to drop just because she fits the same role, in essence, and you're not going to be getting too much out of Kokomi. Unless you go full Hydra DPS on her, it's very hard to give value to Kokomi when everyone already has Barbara. And as free-to-play, you're just going to want to be pulling after other characters sooner than you would Kokomi. Wanderer is a good pick for free-to-play, but he is very needy when it comes to weapons, so make sure you have a weapon ready for him if you pull. Looking at veteran spenders, though, and veteran free-to-play players even, you should by now already have a decent lineup and possibly 2 4-person teams for the Spiral Abyss. And if you wanted a superior Bloom team and need a pair with Nilou from her recent banner, Kokomi is a great help for her. Wanderer is a great character, but is not a must-pull. His damage is nice, but is lacking when looking at other characters in his league. Specifically looking at Zhao, we know Zhao deals a lot more damage, but it also does require a lot more picky builds and supports used in the team. Lastly, if you are a high spender, look maybe into what constellations will benefit the characters the most. As a general rule, most good constellations, other than the C6 of course, are C1 and C2 for a majority of characters in the game. Kokomi's constellations don't really have anything crazy besides her 6th constellation. She's really good at healing and damage at no constellations, so once again, constellations aren't worth it unless you are getting that 6th one, which really just gives her personal damage. Looking at Wanderer, besides his 6th constellation, his 2nd and 4th constellations are fighting for 2nd best. His 2nd constellation increases his skill damage by 4% for every point of the difference between max Ku-Urgyoku points and the present amount of Ku-Urgyoku points. Basically, more damage the longer you are in his skill. His 4th constellation gives a random buff from his 2nd passive talent after you have swirled and gained a buff already from this passive talent. You can have up to 3 different buffs from this talent once you have Constellation 4. Looking at our last question, we ask, do you need the weapons? And Vixen, what information can you share with us?
Neither one is necessary, and it isn't the best of the best for many different characters for both of these weapons. But Kokomi really doesn't need her weapon. Even if you are going that DPS route, she can use a lot of the other different 5 stars and even some other 4 stars as well. And Wanderer is very similar. Wanderer's weapon isn't necessary for him, since he can use a lot of other 5-star weapons, and Solar Pearl and Widsith do the trick as the 4 stars as well. If you are fully going into Wanderer though, his weapon isn't a bad choice. It just isn't necessary for him to be amazingly good.
We hope that this video could help you decide on whether these characters or weapons coming up on this next banner are for you.
As always, if you have any suggestions that may help other players, go ahead and let us know in the comments. Thank you again for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.